Is everybody here? Yep. Good morning. I'm Jeff Campeach. This is my law partner, Phil Arnold, Leslie Harris. I see Deborah Jacobs there, and the rest of our firm out there. We're a small law firm. Thank you for coming. This is the Lay family, except Grandma, who's not feeling well today. But she's here in spirit. She's been with us the whole time. Tommy Lee's family is pleased to announce a settlement of the civil rights case against the King County Sheriff's Office and Deputy Molina. The county has agreed to pay $5 million to Tommy's estate and parents, which we feel is a statement that they have not been truthful with the public. That untruth was most thoroughly disclosed by Deborah Jacobs when she was head of the Office of Law Enforcement Oversight for King County, and so thoroughly reported by the collective press in the Seattle metropolitan area. It's no secret that there was a cover-up. It was so transparent when it was finally revealed. The truth is that Deputy Molina shot and killed an unarmed, 120-pound Asian high school student in the back while he was retreating. And that does not meet the constitutional requirements for the use of deadly force. And the King County Sheriff's Office collectively covered up the truth by concealing, omitting, and misstating, and even tampering with the evidence. What's so startling is that's not surprising in our country. The public has certainly expressed their concern, their disapproval, and their anger at this kind of behavior. The Lee family are refugees from the tyranny of communism. They came to America to live the American dream, that dream so well stated by Martin Luther King. Ironic that a county named after Martin Luther King would be the oppressive government that the Lee family has to stand up to. By all accounts, by all testimony, whether his teachers, family, friends, neighbors, Tommy was a thoughtful young man. His teachers, all of them described Tommy as respectful, somewhat shy, and kind, and also, in his last year or two, motivated to success. He was graduating from high school the day he was shot, going to college. The thing that's interesting about Tommy Lay is that he loved ideas, social ideas, political ideas. He read well past his age. When I first went to the family's house, I was cynical. I thought maybe he was some gang kid that got in a conflict with the police, had a weapon, and got shot. And I was looking at the case like that. And the aunties told me that Tommy was really kind. And when I said, well, what did he do with his spare time? They said, read books. And I thought, oh, this can't be right. So I went into his bedroom. He kept a bedroom at the family house, even though he was starting out on his own with an apartment. And this is what I found. The first book I found is Goethe's Faust, pure Western European philosophy, probably one of the most accepted books of philosophy. And then I found, from the library, checked out to Tommy, The Count of Monte Cristo by Dumas, the French writer. Again, a major piece of European literature. This wasn't part of some school he was in. These were books he was reading. And so we went to the library near Tommy's house with his picture. And I asked the librarian, do you recognize this? Oh, yes. He's in here all the time, reading real books. It probably doesn't matter to our community if he was a reader and a thinker and he was killed, but it is so important to analyze the untruth of the sheriff's office. Tommy loved ideas, and he's dead. He loved to play chess more than video games. He loved to cook and garden with his grandmother, to work in the yard and in landscaping with his father, and he liked to visit with his mother. Everybody said he was respectful. The school teachers described how if they were in their classroom by themselves at the end of the day, that Tommy would walk by and stick his head in and say hello to the teacher. That he never was disrespectful. And the most important thing is there's never an evidence that this young man was ever arrested, committed a crime, even was in a dispute at school. Nothing. Many groups, many people have helped us uncover the truth about Tommy's death. Like I said, the 4 teachers from the South Seattle High School College program who went out of their way to tell us this about Tommy. The press corps keeping this case in the public's eye, asking questions. There were some very thoughtful questions of a press corps that started out believing what the sheriff's office told them. Until, was it a reporter for The Weekly that discovered that there was no knife? And let me tell you about there was no knife. After the shooting, within moments, within 5 minutes of the shooting, 2 sergeants arrived at the scene of Tommy's death. One of them was named Abbott. Sergeant Abbott's task was to ask 6 questions on a form for the sheriff's office. Just 6. The most important question was the suspect armed? And he was to ask the shooter and the officer next to the shooter. Would it surprise you to learn that both of them checked the box unknown? And there was another sergeant named Easterbrook. He arrived while the smoke was still in the air and the officers were circled around Tommy on the ground, bleeding to death. He had heard the word knife on the radio. And so he said, did you get the knife? What he was told by all the officers is there was no knife. This is within 5 minutes of the shooting. It's in the reports. Easterbrook was honest, he wrote it down. Other people were not so honest. After the shooter, Molina, and Owens, the officer next to him, met with a union official, they came up with a story that Tommy was attacking them with a weapon. And he shot him in the chest to stop him. That report was written by Detective Johnson, big officer in the homicide division. And it went to the prosecutor's office, and I got a copy of it. And I read it, and it looked like Tommy attacked the police with a weapon. But I wrote a letter to the medical examiner. Families have got a right to talk to the medical examiners. And I get a letter back from the prosecutor saying they want to come with me. And I wrote back and said, no thanks. The statute doesn't give you that right. And so I went to the medical examiner's office, and I'm sitting there waiting to talk to the medical examiner, and one of the clerks gives me a copy of the autopsy report. And I open it up, and it's on the table over there, the page that matters, but what it says is, pathological diagnosis, penetrating handgun wound of the left lateral back. Number 2, penetrating handgun wound of the medial left back. Perforating handgun wound of the left wrist. Cause of death, handgun wound to the back. Wasn't in Johnson's report. And so I meet with the medical examiner. I said, did you know Detective Johnson? He said, yes, he's quite skilled. I see him a lot. I said, was he at the autopsy? Yes. Would it surprise you to learn that he has failed to include in his report sent to the prosecutor that Tommy was shot in the back? And you know what the answer was? Oh, that can't be right. Read that report again. A year later, King County sheriffs, new sheriff, generated a use of force review, pages and pages. And in that use of force review, they say that it was a lawful shooting because Tommy was attacking the police. But what was he attacking them with? This. How many of you carry a pen? How many of us carry a pen? The only danger the sheriff's office has from pens is things that reporters and lawyers write, not death. This is true. The use of force report concluded that it was justified to take this young man's life because he was holding a plastic ink pen. Now, there are 2 civilian witnesses, unconnected to the sheriff's office, who saw Tommy at less range than me and Ms. Bick here. And they said Tommy had, just before he was shot, because he's walking down the street to where the police shoot him, they got a good look at him under a streetlight, and he has nothing in his hands. Those are facts that are in the federal court record with declarations from these witnesses. And these are not troublemakers. They're very middle-class people employed and respectful of the police. So, in a very real sense, the settlement of this case is a victory for justice for Tommy Lay. It's the truth of what happened. However, we got to say something here, and that is that the problem that led to the cover-up is endemic. That's the reason our streets are full of our citizens demanding transparency, accountability, and reform in the policing. Let's look at the first word, transparency. Transparency means that the truth is there to be seen, maybe by the press first and then the public, because the way the public finds out about the truth is from the press. Second, accountability. Deputy Molina was picked up by his buddies, dusted off, his department covered for him, gave him back his gun, and put him back on the street with no discipline, no new training, nothing. And the detective that orchestrated the cover-up by making sure that the use of force report a year later did not mention that he was shot in the back and claims he had a deadly weapon, is still in charge of the homicides. So this settlement, this press conference, is the family asking not to forget Tommy's death, not to forget the cover-up, but to demand change, reform. We notice that people like Deborah Jacobs, who stood up for the truth, got fired. And she's still fired. And she was head of King County's law enforcement oversight. The family's very troubled by that. Why? And there were a lot of people that stood up for them. There's Mr. Lin Chai, there's Professor Tam Din, who came to help them speak to Sheriff Urquhart, who came to their home to apologize for his department, publicly stating that there was a knife in Tommy's hand when there wasn't. And when he was asked, and this is weeks after the shooting, Su Yen Lei said, well, if Tommy didn't have a knife and he's so little, you know, Tommy's 120 pounds. These deputies are a bit bigger than that. One of them was 6'6", 240, no fat. Marshawn Lynch couldn't have got through that guy. Su Yen says, well, Tommy was so little and he didn't have a knife, why did they shoot him? What does the sheriff say? The sheriff says in front of Professor Din and Mr. Tai, that he says, I wouldn't have shot him. I don't know why they shot him. I'd have just pushed him down. If he had a pen in his hand, I would have taken it away. Now, if you don't believe that, it seems so unbelievable in light of the position the county has taken. A month later, the Asian American Leadership Conference invited the sheriff to speak to them and answer questions about the killing of Tommy Lei. He came there voluntarily as sheriff and said exactly the same thing. I would not have shot Tommy Lei. I'd have just pushed him down. So the truth was out there. Many people helped us with it, and now it's out. The family, one other thing, I was asked to come to a reception for many Asian people for the mayor when she was elected. And there was probably 300 people at the China Harbor restaurant up on the top up there. They were all Asian, almost exclusively immigrants or the children of immigrants, but all decked out in nice clothes, pearls, suits and ties. And the publisher of the Vietnamese newspaper at this big table said, well, this is Jeff Campeach, he's Tommy Lee's lawyer. I had tendinitis for a week because all the people came up and shook my hand, hundreds of people, and said, thank you. We want justice for Tommy. And so our firm, our family, ourselves, we're very grateful that that's been accomplished. But there's still more to do, and unfortunately, even though the public has recognized this, it's slow in coming. Maybe too slow. A famous American labor leader, Cesar Chavez, who organized the poor farm workers in America in the 70s, said something that applies here, and that is, nothing can stop an idea that's time has come. The idea is transparency, accountability, and reform in the American policing. And so that's what the family wants now. They have established the truth about the death of their son. They see that the sheriff's office has taken no disciplinary action. Heck, they promoted him. And the county executive has been silent. The only person in the county that's really stood up was Mr. Germay, who said he listened to the report that Ms. Jacobs' agency brought and said in a public meeting that this omission of facts by the sheriff's office is a clear obstruction of justice. So now we're all going to wait and see what King County does about that. It's embarrassing that King County would be named after Martin Luther King, that the county would collectively allow the suppression of the killing of people of color by the police. that would take no action. And that's what the family wants. These people came to America, this family, to live that dream that Martin Luther King spoke of. The American dream, that if you come here, your success will be the result of your personal integrity, not your color. And this family, every one of them works. Every one of them pays their taxes. Every one of them educates their children. And they did not deserve this. Nor did Tommy deserve this. And we, as a collective community, did not deserve the deceit, the blanket of untruth that was put across the killing. So I've gotten a little bit on my high horse here, and I think maybe you want to talk to the family. They're here to talk to you, whether you want to ask them at the podium questions or whether afterwards you want to speak to them. They're a bit uncomfortable with the setting, but they do have the strength to speak the truth. I remember this, and I'll stop. We're sitting at a big table at a reception for the passage of Initiative 940 at the Puyallup Casino, because the Puyallup tribe really promoted that change. And the sheriff walks over to us, and she says, "Would you mind if I talk to your clients?" And I said, "Of course not." And she sat down, and she held Grandma's hand. And she said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Auntie, University of Washington grad, no shrinking violet, says to her, "We appreciate your expression of condolences, Sheriff. But we want to know what you're going to do about it. What action are you going to take?" The sheriff couldn't have got out of that table faster. I mean, you'd think there was a fire. She was up and out. And the answer is nothing. The sheriff has done nothing. The county executive paid the sanction that the lawyers and the prosecutor office were imposed by the Court of Appeals for a frivolous appeal that delayed this trial. The taxpayers paid the sanction. The taxpayers paid the settlement. So the family's just waiting for the change that the community deserves. All right. Any questions, or would you like, sir?
What's the status of Deputy Molina? The family asked that he be fired.
Deputy Molina, I believe, was either promoted or maintained. He had his gun back within weeks.
He was promoted to detective at a higher wage in July following the shooting.
Did the family or you folks demand the sheriff's office do anything with Deputy Molina as part of the settlement?
But that can't be part of the settlement. I mean, we certainly encouraged it, but it's not part of the settlement. This isn't, you're confused here. This is not the family's failing. This is the political sheriff's failing. Well, you're implying that somehow the family should have done that. They can't do that. The only part of a civil rights suit.
Let me finish our question. Then I'm not trying to be didactic. I'm just asking. Throughout the litigation, which I follow quite closely, there have been a finger pointed at Deputy Molina and his actions and his inactions and his irresponsibility, whether or not he's even available for qualified immunity. You guys have been fighting this. So all I'm asking is, as part of the negotiations, did you or try to have him removed, or was that ever discussion, or did you decide to let the sheriff?
It wasn't a possibility in the suit. I mean, the suit is a damage suit, monetary damage suit, under the Civil Rights Act, intended to allow monetary damages against a sheriff's office or an officer to deter other people in the future from unconstitutional behavior. But his employment status isn't part of the suit.
King County has to follow the collective bargaining agreement. in that collective bargaining agreement, there are certain provisions that govern these matters, and that there's no absolute control
Step over to
in county over that. In fact, that's part of the problem in this situation, is that the county has bargained away the right to supervise, in a large extent, the police department. And I'll give you an example. The majority of voters in King County voted to amend the charter to give the Office of Law Enforcement Oversight the power to independently obtain information and to interview witnesses with respect to police department uses of excessive force and shootings. The collective bargaining agreement, though, between the county and the police guild, bargained away that right and said that shall not be a right the county can enforce. This collective bargaining agreement comes up for renewal December this year, so you can gauge whether the government is committed to reform by what it does with that collective bargaining agreement and the provisions that protect the police at the expense of the safety of the public.
We've seen similar situations with the police union in Seattle.
Yep.
Bills that were going to go after that in Olympia, they've all failed at this point. What are you asking as far as the guild, or are you asking?
Well, first, it's a good question about the guild, and Phil will speak to it, but start with this. The public has voted the sheriff's autonomy out. And so now it's going to be up to the county executive. Private litigants can't change the collective bargaining agreement. But where was the money that supported the sheriff's opposition to the charter change? Where did it come from? Completely from the guild. Over 100,000. And that's the reality of it. You'll notice that in the Seattle consent agreement with the Justice Department, the court said, I'm not going to allow the collective bargaining agreement to get in the way of my requirements under this consent decree for constitutional policing. Constitutional policing just means that the police obey the law. What we have is two systems of law. We have a system that applies to the civilian who commits a crime, and then we have the system that applies to the officer that commits the crime.
So the settlement is the justice that can be reached to its limit under that what?
Under the Civil Rights Act.
What's missing from that justice that you can see?
Well, what's missing now is reform in the policing. We can't effectuate that. Other lawyers have tried to put some conditions in the settlements that affect the police department or the sheriff's office. And after the case is settled, they have no way to enforce it. They are not parties to the collective bargaining agreement. They can't do it. It just doesn't work. The Givens case, the one before us, they had some agreement about conditions. But I talked to the lawyers there, the plaintiff's lawyers, and they said, well, we can't enforce it.
Well, what does that true justice look like?
Well, justice in the Civil Rights Act is admission of responsibility through payment of the verdict or that. You know, even when you get a verdict, the other side never agrees they did anything wrong. The point is, the point of our press here is we've got as much justice for Tommy as we can get. Now it's time for somebody to direct attention at the sheriff's office and the county executive and to say, what are you going to do about this? And the public is demanding it. I mean, how many weeks? I drove through Edmonds, Washington, middle-class community, and there were more Black Lives Matter signs in the yards and people on the street holding the signs, middle-aged people. This is not a radical idea that our legal system should treat people of color fairly, and the police should be accountable, transparent, and we need reform. And that's what's happening. So the family's just hoping that by publicizing this settlement, that there was untruth in the sheriff's office, there was a cover-up, of such an apparent wrong, and it took so long.
Doesn't sound much for justice.
Well, I don't make those decisions for you. That's for the public to decide. You know, there's a difference between reform and justice. I think the family got justice for the death of their child. The public demands reform, which brings justice raining down on our country the way it should. And you're right, sir, but it's don't confuse them. We have a private litigant winning their suit, and on the other side we have a community that's angered and in the streets about the need for reform. And the family recognizes that although they settled their suit that brings justice for Tommy, it doesn't bring the reform to the community that we want, just as you said.
Isn't that reform coming because of the changes coming to the sheriff's office, because of the local vote, and then also quite a few bills in Olympia that would bring reform statewide to add to employees?
Well, I think just like it was a long path to justice for Tommy, it's a long path for reform, and it's going to be made in increments. And as you know, there is opposition. But the family is hoping that by publicizing what happened to their son and the cover-up, that the reform movement will have strength. And there, you know, there's a lot of families who've lost people who are pursuing reform. The Taylors, you know, very eloquent the way they do it. They're not breaking windows. They're making sense. And what I saw at that reception for the Asian community, by the Asian community, was many people wanting reform. We noticed in the courtrooms and the hearings that we had in this case, the gallery was always full of middle-aged, well-dressed, quiet people watching. What's that? Yeah. I think I've just talked way too much. Maybe you might have some questions for the family.
Is there a member of the family that would like to approach the podium and say anything?
So we have a language question, but the mother and father are both here, and the aunties. And I think the mother would like to say something, but it's going to be short, and it's not going to be as easy to ask questions of her. Why don't you come forward, Ms. Hall? This is Tom's mom, and this is Mr. Fong, who's the interpreter.
Tôi là người thông dịch viên.
Question, anybody?
Có ai thắc mắc muốn hỏi gì không?
How does today feel?
Hôm nay đứng đây, cô cảm thấy làm sao?
Thì hôm nay đứng đây thì tôi cảm thấy thì tốt hơn mấy năm trước.
I feel relief. So it's not like the last few years.
How does it feel to know the officers are being?
Cô cảm thấy sao khi mà người cảnh sát kia vẫn còn đeo súng, lại được thăng cấp nữa?
Thì cái đó là chuyện của chính phủ thôi, chuyện của họ thôi. Còn tôi là chỉ biết là chính phủ cho con tôi được ra ánh sáng, được công bằng là tôi mừng rồi.
It is unfortunate that he's still active. At least we got something, bring a little bit of truth to why my son was killed.
He said, bring a little bit of truth. Is that what you said?
Nói là cho con tôi ra ánh sáng, được công bằng, tôi
Yes,
mừng.
at least we were able to bring to the light as to why my son was killed.
Do you feel like you got justice?
Cô nghĩ là như vậy là đã mang lại đủ công bằng cho cháu chưa?
Thì bây giờ thì họ cũng mang đầy đủ công bằng là cho con tôi, cho biết là con tôi là một đứa hiền, không có làm lỗi gì hết. Vậy là tôi vui rồi.
I think that it's satisfactory that they somewhat admit that my son was respectful of the law and he will not,
Move up to the mic.
and he will never try to attack a police officer.
promise of America feels so much promising today.
Excuse me, can you please repeat the question?
That promise you were hoping here in America, you feel it exists.
Cô nghĩ mà ngày cô qua Mỹ là một cái nước tốt đẹp, là lý tưởng lắm. Cô có nghĩ là thật sự nước Mỹ vẫn công bằng như vậy không?
Thì hồi xưa tôi qua đây á, là nước Mỹ rất là tốt, rất là công bằng. Còn bây giờ hiện tại thì quá đông đảo lộn xộn, tôi cũng không biết làm sao.
When I first came to America, from everything I heard about America, America is like ideal in so many aspects. But especially nowadays, there is so many turmoil, and the justice is not that great.
Mấy chục năm trước thì ở đây là dĩ nhiên rồi, ai cũng thích mà.
You know, when I came to America like 30, 40 years ago, you know, America, the best country, but I've been here long enough to know that we do have a lot of problems.
What changes would you like to see from the sheriff's office as a result of all of this?
Oh,
Nói họ là mình cảm ơn.
I thank you very much for being here with us today.
So maybe one of the other family members could answer that question.
Go ahead.
Yuyen, you want to try? Suyen, Yuyen? Both of you. These are Tommy's aunties, and you want to restate your question, miss? We can't quite hear you, so a little louder.
As a result of what happened, what kind of changes would you like to see from the sheriff's office moving forward?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, well, I think, you know, it's kind of, I have like, feel overwhelmed, kind of mixed right now. I think at one point we have somewhat justice for Tommy because there's admission and more clarity and the truth is out. But at the same time, I think the part of getting the police and the sheriff's side to change has been, it just seems like it's so embedded that it's like, you know, making small chips at a time. And we are making progress, I feel, at least through the past, you know, this litigation, the past, you know, 4 years, seen small progress with the passing of I-940 and changes, but I think there's issues like, the big one is just the police accountability and the transparency, and I think it's hard to say how it's all set up, but this a mentality, sometimes I feel that they're colluding or, you know, together versus being just honest about what's happened when there's a police officer involved shooting. Do you have any? Yeah. So last name L-E and then first name U-Y-E-N. U-N.
U-Y-E-N.
So in Vietnamese, it's Lay. Yep. U, D-I-E-U, U.
Oh, H-O.
When you see Tommy's image here, is that what you remember?
Yes, it is.
What else do you remember?
Yeah, I remember his. You see it still. Sorry, just brings back. I remember his like smiling face, which his bright smile. I know he's not gonna come back. So this day has been still kind of hard for me. I want to talk about his dreams.
This is Tommy's dad. He called himself Sonny.
Thanks everybody come over for today.
You got to get closer to that microphone.
Yeah, thanks everybody coming for today. So, yeah, the settlement is just piece of the justice for our families, but nothing gonna change yet. We didn't see anything change from the police department or any justice for my son. It's just still there, still paining our family every day. It's nothing gonna change the ways for now. Even the settlement is gone out, but our family is still paining every day. Nothing, doesn't matter how much money is gonna pay for us families, but gonna take our son back. I want my son back. I want everybody, every family in this country, not gonna happen to like our families. That's what I want for now. Thank you.
Sonny, it's been 4 years, a very long 4 years to get to this point. Your thoughts about today and that settlement?
They should do earlier than they should do more than earlier than for now. It's late, but it's okay. It's been hurt for our family. They embarrassed our families for the past 4 years. Still for now. Thank you.
Anybody got a question for Shreya?
I heard someone was asking about his dreams. A couple months before he passed away, he was in Grandma's room and he was talking to Grandma. And he said, "Grandma, I'm going to get an education. I want to become a firefighter. I'm going to serve this community and make you proud." He never got a chance to.
Today is not a happy day for our family either. Even the settlement is paying off. We're still paying every single day the loss of my son.
Is there anybody got any other questions?
I'm curious, what will the family do from here? Will you still stay active and try to push for police reform?
Yes, definitely. I think we'll would like to be involved. And I know we continue to get reached out to from community members. And I know there's some bills that are like in the process and works to help, get this reform and to help with the future of all this for the community. Yeah, so definitely.
Thank you for coming. We're hoping that the county government will answer the questions about their employment practices in the sheriff's office and whether or not the officers that conspired to cover up the truth have been held accountable. What shocked Mr. Arnold and I and our staff is that when you looked at the use of force report, the one that generated so much angst in the community, it was signed by so many officials in the sheriff's office that there's just no chance that anybody's going to be disciplined for the untruth in there. It's just, what you have is it's replete across the department. And it was surprising. It was very surprising because it never mentioned that Tommy was shot in the back. It never mentioned that he didn't have a knife or a weapon. And it wasn't one person that signed it. It was captains and upper officials in each of the various departments of the sheriff's office. And And this has got to be the only place in the country where the labor union's representative gets a vote on whether or not the force used was lawful or not. Well, what else could the union officials say? They're there to represent the shooter.
You believe there's systemic corruption and a cover effort in the...
Say that again?
Sorry.
I couldn't hear you.
Oh, do you believe there's systemic corruption within the King County Sheriff's Office?
Obviously. The corruption is to hide the truth whenever one of their officers violates the law. That it's corrupt for a government officials to be free of criminal consequence of unlawful activity where the public is held to that account. There are not two systems of laws in our country. That's corruption at its worst. If the ethos or the moray in the department is to cover up for your brother or your comrade at the cost of justice and the cost of the community's trust, that's corruption at its worst. Corruption just isn't somebody giving somebody money to do something. That is absolutely corruption. To hide the truth about a killing and to tamper with the evidence, to make up stories, to submit that in a report to the county prosecutor. Is corruption at its worst. We don't have to live by the law. You do. That's corruption.